Okay, I think we can get started. Thank you. Anxiety is not a disease, it's an emotion. And if we can learn to work with it instead of fighting it, that could be the key to unlocking our greatest potential. Our next speaker is Dr. David H. Rosmarin, Harvard Medical School professor, clinical psychologist, and author of Thriving with Anxiety. He's the founder of the Center for Anxiety. He's worked with over 10,000 patients and published more than 100 research articles on medical health. His work has been featured in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Good Morning America, and TED. Uh, Dr. Rosmarin is here to challenge what we think and what we know about anxiety and show us how to turn us into an ally instead of an enemy. And please welcome Dr. Rosmarin, who, of course, not of course, but they grew up in Toronto, and I believe is a graduate of Tenenbaum Chat, where I have the pleasure of teaching still. So it's nice to bring a Torontonian into our program. So thank you very much. Vakasha, Dr. Rosmarin.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that kind introduction, and I'm going to share my slides. Just a minute. By the way, it made me very anxious, the fact that the polling wasn't working. So I had to sit with my own anxiety here. But good thing I know what to do.
Okay.
Okay, there we go. Can you see my slides?
Yes, yes, yes.
Fantastic. Okay, so I wanted to start with a question, which is how many people here feel overwhelmed by the state of the world today? Please raise your proverbial hands by putting into the chat um, or emojiing. I had four anchors. The one is going to be, of course, are you kidding? The other one is, yeah, pretty much. The third was maybe depends on the day. And the last one was not at all. Why are you even asking? So maybe I'll just ask this. Does anyone pick the fourth anchor? Is anyone saying, "Well, no, I'm not at all overwhelmed by the state of the world today. Why are you even asking that question?" Esther, is that true that you actually do not feel overwhelmed at all by the state of the world today? And Robin, I see your hand is up as well. You can unmute for a minute. Esther, I'm very concerned about you. If you're not overwhelmed at all by the state of the world today, then perhaps you have not been paying attention to what's been going on. This is just the past 5 years. And all of this is in addition to the normal stressors like work, family, health, community. But COVID pandemic, 2021 Capitol riots, US withdrawal from Afghanistan. Haiti had an earthquake, which was the third most deadly since the 1900. Since the 1900, 230,000 people lost their lives in Haiti in a day, in 2 days. 2022, Russian invasion of Ukraine, fentanyl. 2023, AI, like the beginning of it, an existential threat all over the place. October 7th, of course. And then 2024, last year. That was fun. Iranian ballistic missiles, incredible anti-Semitism. The presidential election cycle was laughably insane, completely insane. Syria collapsed. I mean, if you don't feel overwhelmed, then you are not paying attention. You're just not paying attention. And it's hard not to pay attention when you've got one of these devices, which connects you to the world every minute of the day. Personally, I've definitely felt overwhelmed and I've definitely felt anxiety, and that's normal. That is healthy. And that's my thesis. That is my thesis that I'm going to share with you. The problem is not that we experience anxiety. It's that we've been taught to fear anxiety, to get rid of it, to try to eliminate it. In truth, we all experience anxiety, except for Esther, whose hand is still up, and I'm still very concerned about Esther. Um, it's a natural human emotion, and we need to shift our mindset and start using anxiety for growth rather than to what it's currently doing, which is when we try to eliminate it, it's just creating suffering. So my goal today is to do two things. One, I want to turn everything that you know about anxiety on its head. And two, I want to give you a four-step process to transform anxiety from a burden to a benefit. Here's how I came to my conclusions. It started 5 years ago during the pandemic. As the founder of Center for Anxiety, we had about 500 patients at that time who were active. And I had to move all of my clinicians to telehealth in 2 weeks. And there were reports about anxiety and depression and suicidality and substance abuse and divorce going through the roof. And I was genuinely concerned what was going to be with all these patients under my care, what was going to be with my staff, what was going to be with the economy, how was I going to manage this under my license? And a couple of weeks into the pandemic, I found something incredible, that our patients were actually doing better in many cases than ever. We started sampling them, and I found 50, 60, even 70% of our patients were saying that they were thriving during the pandemic, whereas other people who had not had an anxiety disorder in the past and not gotten treatment, they didn't know what to do. They were struggling. The patients who were in care were actually doing better than people on the outside. But it was anecdotal. Couple of polls, couple of questions asked to myself, asked to my own patients, asked to my staff about their patients. So last year I decided to crunch the numbers, and I could not believe what we found. Together with my dear colleague, Dr. Stephen Pirutinsky, we looked at data from 764 patients who presented to Center for Anxiety at any point between January and December 2020. And what we found is that all groups had a significant reduction in anxiety, and that none of the groups, the group of patients who were in treatment prior to March 2020 did not have a discernible bump in anxiety at any point between April and December 2020. It's an astounding finding. This is the highest risk group of individuals with pre-existing anxiety disorders who had previously been either significantly distressed or impaired by their anxiety. And the fact that they got some sort of care, reasonable amount of care before March 2020, in fact, even one session, as long as they were in therapy prior to March 2020, they did not have a discernible bump in anxiety at any point for the rest of the pandemic. How many people here on the line did not have a discernible bump in anxiety at any point during the pandemic? It's a pretty amazing finding. It's a pretty amazing finding. And what I've learned since this experience, it's actually changed my professional life in many ways. It's changed my approach to anxiety. It's changed my approach, my personal emotions. And it's the central message that I want to share with you, which is that we need to change our relationship with anxiety. This is how I see anxiety today. This slide. What's happening beneath the surface of the growth? There's a seed, and it goes into the ground, and it rots, and it smells, and it's putrid, and it's difficult to look at. The casing of that seed disintegrates in the ground and becomes putrid, like I mentioned. But it's that casing, the putrid rotting of the casing, which becomes fuel, which drives the growth of the plant. That's the first nutrients that the plant needs in order to extend its roots into the soil. Now, I want to be clear. There is something called clinical anxiety, which interferes with your life. If you have clinical anxiety, you should get help, professional help, whether that's pharmacology or therapy or something professional. But many times, most of the time, I would say, anxiety, it's distressing and it's upsetting and it's not pleasant, but it doesn't disrupt your day to day. It's uncomfortable and uncontrollable, and that is a good thing. It's a good thing. I don't share this with secular audiences, but I'm going to share it with you. This is a Torah concept. We see it in Jewish history. Hannah cried so much. Eli, the prophet, thought she was drunk. When's the last time you thought some of your friends thought you were drunk for crying? Right? Eliyahu Navi, he died. He prayed to God that he would die. So did Moshe Rabbeinu. That's called suicidal ideation. They were in such pain. And David HaMelech, King David, Yigadi ben Chati, Asche b'chol layla mitati, v'dimati arsi amse. Do you know what that means? Every night I groan in my bed so much that I drench my pillow with tears. Now, everyone here has had a rough night. But when's the last time you soaked your pillow so much with tears that you had to change it out for another pillow? Apparently, that was David HaMelech every single night. Yonah, he would prefer to die. In the modern day, lots of examples. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. There's stories about Rabbi Sorel Salanter and even the Chafetz Chaim dealing with some amount of depression at some point. And this Torah concept, we see it in the modern day. It remains true, even in our society, even in our decadent anti-anxiety society today, when we're consumed with the obsession about happiness. Last generation, I mean, Sir Winston Churchill, he had a fear of speaking. He had literally a phobia of public speaking. Once he got up in front of the House of Commons, he froze for 3 full minutes. He could not get a word out. And he said, "No, I'm gonna conquer this." And he conquered his fear. His anxiety fueled him to become more resilient. He led the free world through World War II. Oprah Winfrey had significant anxiety. At one point, she had a box office flop. One of her movies flopped. I think the only one ever. Um, and she became so emotionally numb and so depressed that she reported eating 30 pounds of macaroni and cheese. That's a lot of macaroni and cheese. And then she learned to let go. She leaned into the feelings and said, you know what? I'm not in control, and that's okay. She spiritually grew from her emotions, and she became the icon. Harpo was born out of that experience. And my favorite, Taylor Swift, the first time she sang a national anthem at a football game, she was paralyzed with fear. And she learned to she speak about her anxiety. She turns it into a point of connection with her gazillion fans. And I like to joke, and she can shake it off. But typically, we don't think about anxiety this way. This is what we view anxiety as. We see it as a dark tunnel and something that we have to get rid of, and an isolating place that no one else experiences, which is so not true. So not true. We see it as a disease. We see it as something that needs to be cured. I believe that is causing the anxiety epidemic, our obsession with an anxiety-free life. We're not allowing ourselves to have small levels of anxiety. And the minute we start to feel a little of anxiety, it actually spikes because we're interpreting that as a failure. And we withdraw and we think something's wrong with us. The consequences are very significant. They're very, very significant. This is a chilling slide. It's chilling. Our mental health is falling off a cliff. It's falling off a cliff. Objectively speaking, healthy school children today, yes, healthy school children today have as much anxiety as psychiatric hospital inpatients from the 1950s. The number one reason that people go on disability is because of anxiety and depression in the United States. The number one reason. Mental disability is the number one reason. And of course, the suicide rate, the self-injury rate, it's chilling. And it's because of this. It's because of this concept that we can't stand to feel uncomfortable. Something's wrong with me when I feel uncomfortable. That's what we've been taught. And in areas of the world where people aren't taught that, this is the result. Did you know in low-income countries, sorry, in middle-income countries, anxiety is half of what it is in the United States and France and other high-income countries. And in low-income countries like Peru, where this young woman is from, it's half as much as in middle-income countries. Now, by the way, when's the last time you saw a smile like this from an American child? This young girl, she hasn't had a bath in a month. There's no running water in her village. She has no toilet, nothing. Groceries, forget about it. Siri, what's that? Forget it. She is indigent. Poverty isn't even the word. If you think about it, like, why? It's a bizarre phenomenon. Higher malnutrition, lower anxiety. Higher financial insecurity, lower anxiety. Greater risk for diseases, lower anxiety. Stronger economies, higher anxiety. Better technology, higher anxiety. More advanced medical care, anxiety goes up. And it's not just because we're diagnosing more. There are objective measures, like I mentioned, that anxiety is going through the roof. Why are the most privileged people on planet Earth today the most anxious? Furthermore, anxiety is stratified by privilege. The more privileged you are, the more anxious you will be. And it's because of what I said before. This is our approach. This is our approach. Anxiety does not happen because of external factors. It doesn't happen because of COVID. It doesn't happen because of Ukraine. It doesn't happen even because of anti-Semitism. Uncertainty and adversity do not create anxiety. A crazy world does not create anxiety. The world has always been crazy. It was actually more crazy last century. The number of people who died, the number of people who were murdered, substantially more. It's our expectation for an anxiety-free life. That's what's driving us crazy. That's the culprit. Reducing our discomfort. We don't embrace it. Hiding it, not sharing it with others, not being real, like our last speaker suggested. And we try to wrest, maybe most of all, we try to wrest control over the world as opposed to accepting the fact that we're just human and we're not going to be in control. Not of everything. I really believe this is the root cause of the anxiety epidemic. When we start to feel anxious, we think something's wrong with us, we disconnect from others, and we try to grab onto control of things that we do not have control over. Because we think, in the context of privilege, when you're walking around, you got one of these all the time, you think you have control over things. You're putting on a show socially, and you're never really in touch with yourself because, well, you're distracted. So we viscerally internalize that there's something to fear. Anxiety is something to fear instead of recognizing that this is just human. Now, I don't want to get clinical here, but I have to mention something. I'll mention two things. Number one, I have no problems with psychiatric medication when it's used appropriately. If the intention of psychiatric medication is to take your anxiety down from, let's say it's low, medium, and high, okay? If you're high in terms of your anxiety level and you need to get it to a medium level so you can live your day to day, great. But if your goal is to get to a low level or to get rid of your anxiety, you lose. And that's what's happening today. In summer of 2023, summer 2023, there was a national panel of physicians here in the United States, funded by the US government, who decided to make a recommendation that at all PCP visits, all visits with the primary care providers, in Canada, we call that a GP or general practitioner, individuals, adults would be screened for anxiety at every visit. Okay, not a bad thing in of itself. We want to know how anxious people are. But here's the problem. There was a measure which was used called the GAD-2. It asks people, how much anxiety have you had in the last 2 weeks? And how much worry have you had in the last 2 weeks? There's a 4-point scale for each one, starting with 0, none, to 4, substantially. Take a guess what the cutoff was used for potentially having clinical anxiety. 0. Now, how many people on the call today have had 0 anxiety in the last 2 weeks? Anyone? Not even Esther. What about 0 worry in the last 2 weeks? Honestly, if you have 0 worry and 0 anxiety in the last 2 weeks, that's diagnostic. You're either a narcissist or you're a substance user, or you're just completely checked out. And today, those are the criteria being used to flag people for a potential anxiety disorder diagnosis in doctors' offices across America. We have become obsessed with getting rid of anxiety entirely. We are conflating this normal emotion with a disease, and it is not. And the result is horrific. Prescriptions of benzodiazepines, which are Xanax, Valium, Klonopin, and company. Do you know that there are 100 million prescriptions which are dispensed annually by US pharmacies? There's only 350 million people in this country, including kids. This is insanity. And beyond farm, do a search. Do me a favor. Do a search right now on using Google. Reduce my anxiety. See what comes up, or bust my anxiety. Get rid of my anxiety. You'll get a million hits, at least millions, tens of thousands of approaches to get rid of it. Potions and bombs and mantras and meditations and therapies. And I get it. Like, anxiety is unpleasant and it's distressing. And yeah, if it's clinical, get help. Which means if it's interfering with your life, if you can't function, get the help you need. But It's not dangerous or problematic to have anxiety. Center for Anxiety has seen over 10,000 patients. How many of them have died because of high anxiety alone? Zero. How many of my colleagues in anxiety centers around the world have had a patient die from high anxiety? Zero. You have a built-in cooling system, the parasympathetic nervous system. It's built into your body. But we pursue an anxiety-free life. I think it's because we're obsessed with control. We want to hide our emotions, and it's unpleasant. But we're missing out on the opportunity. We're missing out on the opportunity. Because when we embrace this emotion, this aspect of our lives that we all have, that all of our kids have, all of our friends have, anyone you've ever met, anyone you ever will meet has in some degree, when we embrace it, it can do amazing things. It can increase our resilience, it can strengthen our relationships, and it can help us to let go of control. When we try to eliminate it, we lose, period. But when we embrace it and we turn it into our ally, not our enemy, it can do incredible things for us. Incredible things for us. If you go to the gym, you'll be hopefully a sweaty, uncomfortable mess, out of breath, mild pain. Why would you do this? Look at this guy. He's literally dripping sweat from his nose. It's disgusting. What is he thinking? What's he thinking? It's because he's building physical fitness. The guy's a beast. It's awesome. He's ripped. Look at the guy. Anxiety's the same way. Who here has heard of exposure therapy? Please, show of hands. No one's heard of exposure therapy? AD has or Adi has. That's it. Just, okay, someone else. Jack. Thank you, Jack. Exposure
Yeah,
therapy. Anyone?
exposure therapy.
Sima has. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm going to tell you a crazy story about exposure therapy. I had a patient. Her name was, we'll call her Nicole, and she came in with hypochondriasis, which was clinical health anxiety. She had MRIs, and we knew one thing about her brain is that she did not have an aneurysm, but she was obsessed that she had an aneurysm. She thought her anxiety would spike, her brain would explode, she would drop dead, and it would be bad. She starts avoiding going out. By the time she came to my office, she literally could only go to my office and go home and go to work and go home. She would not go to the supermarket, she would not go on dates, she would not go anywhere. She was debilitated because of her hypochondriasis. And we did exposure therapy, which meant she had to face her fears. So we watched videos about aneurysms. She read stories about people who were struggling with aneurysms. She went to a hospital neurology ward, and then she took risks, like leaving her house, getting her heart rate up. Risks, they weren't real risks. Risks for her anxiety. At one point, I had her take a plane to which she didn't even tell me, paid cash for a ticket, went on an airplane, went somewhere else, stayed overnight somewhere, took the risk of dying, so to speak, and ending up in a city morgue. Of course, she was fine, but it was terrifying for her. And I pushed her like crazy, and she overcame her obsessions, and she graduated from therapy. She did great.
Wow.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing. And then the fun started. She got married and called me up a couple years later saying that she was pregnant. Great, mazel tov. She said, well, not so fast. The doctors thought that her baby would die because they detected in utero that he had an aneurysm. Crazy story. And I expected she would just fall apart, given her history. But she rallied. She didn't. Her inner mom just surged forth. She was, of course, the baby needed life-saving surgery, and she was terrified during the surgery, but appropriately so. She pulled through, and so did he. Thank God. It's fine. It's fine today. Healthy, wonderful kid. And when I spoke to her about it, she said that she became resilient because she had pushed against her anxiety. Because she had taken the message of anxiety to build up her strength. She built up her ability to withstand it, and that's what got her through. Everyone here today has done this in some way. Maybe not in such an extreme, pronounced, dramatic way, but you have all courageously embraced your anxiety in some way. There have been times where you were a little nervous, but you went over to that person. You were concerned, but you applied for that job. You were, weren't sure what's going to be with an investment, but you pushed ahead anyway. And you know this, you know in your gut, you're never going to get rid of anxiety completely. And the experience of anxiety is not an indication that things are going to go well or not go well. It's an emotion that sometimes you just got to push through. And when you do, well, it creates the mental muscle tone. And you need that mental muscle tone to get over life's hurdles. Let's talk about relationships. The irony of human relationships is that we are strongest when we have each other. You've seen the Jewish people have seen this over the last 2 years in spades, in spades. We are so much stronger together. But on the other hand, if you want to create intimacy and you want to create connections with others, you have to show that you need them. So the more that you show you need other people, the more vulnerable you are and show that you're weak in some ways, the actually more strong you become because people come. And that's what anxiety does in relationships. It can supercharge your emotional intimacy because if you share what's on your mind, what's on your heart, that's what creates the connection. The strongest relationships in your life are probably with the people who you've shared the most with. There's a case I dealt with several years ago, a survivor of 9/11. We'll call him Sal, and he was married to a lovely woman named Rosemary. Sal became depressed. He became anxious. He became avoidant of certain situations. They had a family together. It was interfering with their family. And Rosemary was really struggling to like accept his emotional issues, and she wanted him to move on. And it had already been 5 years and 10 years and 15 years. And, she was getting agitated with him. And in therapy, from talking to them, I helped Rosemary to realize that she wasn't just angry at Sal, she was terrified. And she had a need for control over him. She didn't like that he could always play the card of feeling anxious, but it was a real card. He really struggled. And instead of her protesting and getting angry, I encouraged her to confront and to express her own anxiety and how it made her feel anxious when he was being sucked into the vortex of 9/11. She became humble and it transformed their relationship. The more she expressed humility and need, the more Sal was able to stand up and do what had to get done because he didn't want to hurt her. He was a nice guy. He was just struggling. And he found that inner strength when she expressed her anxiety. By stopping to fix him and instead supporting him and creating lines of communication about her own feelings. Anxiety, when we communicate it with others, it softens things and it can create more intimacy and connection and help them to actually be there for us. Now, sometimes they won't be, but then they probably wouldn't be anyway. So fortunately, in this case, it worked out. I want to talk about letting go of control. Now, who here likes to lose control? Right, no one. But as long as you expect it and you're a willing participant, doesn't it feel good to let go? Neurobiologically, anxiety involves the fight or flight response. That's why your heart beats, you have shortness of breath, sweaty palms and muscle tension, all in order to mobilize you to fight or flee from a perceived threat. Now, the excitement response also involves fight or flight. They're both mediated by something called adrenaline or epinephrine. When a thrill seeker goes on a roller coaster or does a bungee jump or skydiving, they experience the adrenaline rush as opposed to the adrenaline cascade of anxiety. But neurobiologically, they're the exact same. They're the exact same. There's only one psychological difference. When somebody is engaged in an adrenaline rush and excitement, they're letting go willingly. They're saying, I'm not in control and I don't want to be in control. I'm going to let the roller coaster take me for a ride. And when someone's anxious, they are holding on and trying to grab control over something that they cannot control. When we embrace uncertainty willingly and surrender, isn't that Purim? That's the message of Purim. We experience excitement and elation and connection. I'm going to give you 4 steps to put this into practice very pragmatically in your lives. Now, of course, if you have clinical anxiety, again, get professional help. Don't just rely on these steps. But the principles remain even for clinical anxiety. And these are the 4 steps: identify, share, embrace, and let go. Okay, identify. When you feel anxious, and you will feel anxious at some point, take your phone and put it away. Don't squelch the sensations. Don't put it out of your mind. Don't distract yourself. Don't shut off your mind before you have time to register. Process your worries. Think about what you're upset about. Think about the worst case scenario. Stop what you're doing. Go for a walk. Don't come back until you know what you're anxious about. The feelings, that foreboding, that stomach upset, the heart palpitations, the difficulty breathing, it's happening for a reason. Understand what it is. What are you afraid will happen? Identify your fears. Sorry, identify your fears. 2, share. Talk about it with someone else. Again, our last speaker spoke about this, but you can speak to anyone. It can be a coworker, a friend, a partner. It could even be a stranger, where you connect with somebody about your anxiety. You show the vulnerable emotions and let them validate you and be there for you in the way that we viscerally know how. We viscerally know how. Now, if you're not ready to say it, that's fine, but then write it down and put it into a letter or an email and send it. Don't suffer alone. Share it. Number 3, embrace. This is the building resilience piece. When you feel anxious, don't fight it. Don't fight it. Let it ride. Let it happen. And before you feel anxious, do things that intentionally and deliberately will make your anxiety worse. I know that sounds crazy. It sounds like counterintuitive advice. But I really believe that every school throughout the entire world should have physical fitness, where people build their kids learn to build their physical stamina, their physical capabilities, their response time, and emotional fitness, where children do things to learn how to face adversity, how to face emotional adversity. We are not giving kids the opportunity. We're babying them. We're making them feel anxious about their anxiety. We've become anxious about anxiety. We are anxious about our kids' anxiety, as opposed to helping them to build the capacity for resilience. The only way you get to resilience is by facing adversity. That's the only way. There is no resilience without adversity. There is no building muscle tone without pressure. So emotionally, intentionally and repeatedly, I give this advice to everyone. Do one thing a week that makes you emotionally uncomfortable. If you're socially anxious, speak to someone once a week that makes you uncomfortable. Raise your hand in class. Volunteer to do something. There's so many other examples. If something gives you panic sensations, do it once a week at the level that you're at. Doesn't have to be a 9 out of 10, but a 4 or a 5. Do it. And finally, let go. Think back to that identify when you're thinking, what am I truly afraid of? And when you're ready, admit, acknowledge for even a moment that you're not in full control over that outcome. You're going to do your part, but at the end of the day, it ain't in your hands, at least not 100% in your hands. Enjoy the freedom. Enjoy the freedom of not being in control for everything, of everything under the sun. Okay, I see the chat is lighting up with questions and comments. So I would love to be able to engage with you a little bit before we wrap up. Um, However, I also want your feedback, and I have a gift. Um, my publisher, HarperCollins, is interested in getting feedback on my talks. So, which makes me super anxious, but I have to share it anyway. So, I have a free introductory chapter of Thriving with Anxiety, my book, which is available for anyone who completes this feedback. It's a simple form. I think there's about 6 questions. They're like emojis. It's super simple to do. So, you can scan the QR code, or you can go to that um, uh, what's it called? That URL. I'm actually going to put that into the chat now, so that way you all have it. Um, So yeah, please do give me feedback. Let me know I can do better, and let me know what you got out of this talk. And beyond that, I just hope you'll keep in touch with me. There's my direct contact information, and for Center for Anxiety as well. And if you want to learn more about Thriving for Anxiety, there it is. In sum, just to bring this to a close, the world is crazy. It's a crazy world. It always has been. And anxiety is going to happen. Always has, and it always will. So therein lies the opportunity to build resilience, to build connection with others, and to let go. Like I said, please keep in touch with me, and thank you very much.
All right, there are a few questions in the chat box that you can take a quick look at, and then maybe if anybody has, we have a couple minutes, just for a few minutes for questions, if anyone wants to unmute themselves and
Okay.
ask. Okay. Somebody just said the link doesn't work. I didn't check that yet, but just to let you know.
That's weird. Let me check that.
Yeah.
It does work actually. I just completed the survey and I got my bonus.
Hey, where you go? Way to go. Let me know what you think of the book. Thank you.
No, the code, the barcode thing didn't work.
It worked for me, sorry.
Oh, okay. It didn't work for me.
Well, I put it into there's a link in the chat, but I'll put it back into the chat.
Okay, I'll try that.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? You want to take a quick look at the chat? There are, I think, a few points there. I don't know that that's true when you're flying an airplane. There's no anxiety. It's true
Flying
there
in
might
an
be.
airplane, the plane could crash anyone, but we are not anxious because there is nothing to do about it. Our lives in the hands of the co-pilot. That's a really interesting idea. I have the same meditation, so to speak. When I get onto a plane, I touch the outside aluminum on the side, and I'm like, wow, now I'm off duty. This is not up to me. I'm not going to be in that cockpit, and even if I was, I wouldn't know what on earth to do. So therefore, I am relinquishing my control. And I have a couple of colleagues. One recently told me that she's anxious, very anxious, doesn't like to cede control, but when she sits in a plane, she's able to do that because she knows there's nothing she can do and she accepts it. So, to Larry's point, yes, I think a lot of people do that. Some people struggle to, but therein lies the opportunity to let go. You might need the other strategies though to get there. So identifying what it is you're afraid of, which isn't always crashing, by the way, it could be something else. Sharing it with someone else, sharing it because that just gives us connection, embracing it, so going on planes, and then that last one is just gold. So
Okay. Any quick questions before we go on to our last speaker? It's interesting. A few people saying link didn't work, but a few people said the link did work. So I don't. That's creating anxiety for people I know.
I don't know if this fits in under the category, but I'm curious about hypochondriacs and if
yeah,
that's
sure.
also anxiety or how to work with a hypochondriac, like as a relative or a client.
Yeah, so I gave that case example. Yeah, I'm also having trouble with the link from my own computer. So what I'm gonna do,
Huh?
pop it up. Let's see. I
Somebody
think
didn't put on the socks?
what was that? Yeah, there might be just be a blocker because I'm at
But
work today.
somebody says you have to put the HTTP. That's
There you, well, I put it in there, but yeah, so don't just click on the link, copy and paste it into your, oh, and the enter code is TIM, not TI. So let me do that one more time.
as in Torah in motion.
Car in motion, not TI.
Yes. Okay.
So anyhow, thank you all for giving me feedback. There was
Sima,
a
you wanted
question. What was that last
to
question? What was that
yeah.
question that was asked before? I want to make sure we get to that.
Oh, about hypochondriac. Like,
Hypochondriac.
yeah.
Yeah. So WebMD is the bane of my existence when I'm dealing with someone who has health anxiety because they will check and check and check and check and it's not doing anything. So, first step is to prevent that response and not do that. But then often people who have health anxiety will not go to the doctor, ironically. Like they'll check in and check themselves and do body scanning and lots of research online and asking friends and family about stuff, but they won't actually go to the doctor. So, what we really need to do is build the resilience by going to the doctor and then build the awareness by not engaging in those distracting responses, which are really an attempt to quell and to squash the anxiety. But just to be clear, hypochondriasis is often debilitating. So that we're already talking about clinical disorders. I'm sort of giving you some loose ideas about how to use these technologies that I shared with you today. But if you actually have hypochondriasis and it's causing you significant impairment, then don't just rely on this talk. Like get someone to troubleshoot it with you.
Yeah, I thank you so much. Just the question a little bit more focused in would be how to deal with a hypochondriac. Like as a person in relationship with a hypochondriac, how are you supposed to respond
That
when
sounds
they
like
have, ABC, and they
yeah.
went to the doctor, they didn't go to the doctor, and like every time you speak to them, it's all about them and all about their illness.
Yeah, sounds like Rosemarin and Sal. So, there probably is some emotions coming up for you, or I assume it's you, for other people in the family around that hypochondriasis, and can they actually tap into their own anxiety and share that? Um, it can take a long time to facilitate those conversations, depending on how much um, uh, uh, anger has been expressed in the past, how much frustration has been expressed in the past, how close the relationship is to begin with, how comfortable people are really opening up and being vulnerable and connecting together. So, this is not, I'm giving sort of clear advice that it's not necessarily easy to implement. I did recently have a workshop on 30 days to thriving with anxiety. We had a whole session on dealing with your own anxiety and in the context of relationship or other people's anxiety in the context of your relationship with them. So I have more to say, but it goes beyond our scope of our brief talk today. But great question.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rosmarin. A pleasure to see you after many,
Good to see
many
you
years.
too.
And okay, very good. Okay, we'll take about a 3-minute break, and Rabbi Doron Perez will conclude our program. We'll thank everybody. I know many of you have been here all day. Many of you are coming in and out. The recordings, a lot of people have been sent us private emails. The recordings will be available, as soon as possible. Be able to listen, to watch all this as you can, or 3,000 other programs that we've had for Torn Motion. If you go to the website, our library, as a matter of fact, it gives you an opportunity. We've actually redone the sort of library of all our recordings, and we're still, many, many upgrades to the website. If you want to take a look and any feedback, we're always happy to hear. But in other words, we'll wait. We'll take a couple-minute break, a couple minutes, and Rabbi Paris will speak. And I just want to once again thank Marcia and Michael Lax for sponsoring the program and for all the wonderful work they do in our community and beyond. And have many happy occasions to come together as personally and communally. And thank you for all your personal friendship and your support for Torn Motion. Thank you very much. Okay, any comment, Rabbi Perez?